Okay, so let's just get started here. I am live with Gavin McHale, mindset coach with Craig Ballantyne. So, Gavin, this is our first time meeting. Craig has been a long-term, recurring guest on this show with Tom and Nick. They've been friends for a long time. So it's cool now that I think both of them have us on their team jumping into these sorts of things. So
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to meet you, man. What is your official title with Craig, and what do you do with Craig Ballantyne?
I think official title is performance coach, success coach. I like to call it a combination of business coaching, life coaching, personal development coaching. I sum it up as I'm a vibe coach. I help you, improve your vibe, make sure that you're playing at the top of your game, kind of thing. So, but yeah, I've absolutely loved it, and I think when you talked about your audience, I think similar audiences to your audience is similar to who I work with regularly. So I know I can speak to some of their issues and some of their pain points for sure.
So I've noticed that with Craig that it's not just limited to business coaching, but overall life coaching in general. And like,
Yeah.
look, the number one thing holding you back in your business might be your messed up relationship with your wife. And that's the thing you need to focus on fixing first to move forward your business. So why do you guys look at that overall big picture and not just limit it to the business coaching?
Yeah. I think I've learned this from Craig, since starting on his team is that, you know, there are so many parallel lines in all of the parts of our lives, right? So our relationships, our time management, our money management, our beliefs around money, they're so connected. And, business success is often highly correlated to relationship success and how you manage your money and all those other things. So what we definitely try and do is, people will come in and they'll tell us what they want, right? But we kind of try and go that layer deeper and recognize, okay, what is the thing that if you improve this, everything in your life will improve? Because I think what Craig has learned, I mean, he's one of the OGs, man. Like he's been doing this for so long. And I think what he has really learned is that like he puts such an emphasis on family that he's like, it really doesn't matter how much money you make or how big your business is. If like the reason why you want to build a big business, which is probably to take care of your family and to have the freedom to spend time with your family, if that's not taken care of, none of it matters. So I think he's been really good at teaching like the more important part of business coaching, which is what's this all for? Why are we doing this? And that really guides our coaching and guides the questions we ask and the things we look for with our clients.
So it's going one level deeper and seeing what they're really trying to get out of their business.
Yeah, and out of their life, and like what's when they say, hey, I want to make more money or I want to save time or whatever, it's like why? Like getting deeper on that kind of like the why. You talk about start with why and things like that, but getting to the real heart of why. Why they're doing all of this. What's the point, right?
How do you get deeper with your clients then? Is it just continuously drilling down into the why? Like for myself, there's that, I think it's called the 7 levels deep exercise where you just
Yeah.
keep asking yourself why, 7 times. And by the time you get to the seventh layer of that, you've really, really kind of drilled down into like the deepest inner meaning of why you want to do what it is you're talking about doing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it, and that's something that we will often do. But another part of coaching really is reading between the lines, right? So when I'm on a coaching call and someone's telling me something, I'm trying to decipher what are they really saying, or like what are they not saying that tells me what they are saying, right? So it's a matter of yes, going 7 layers deep or as many layers deep as you can in terms of asking why, but also it's a matter of knowing the hard questions to ask. What are the questions that no one has ever asked them before? What are the questions that they maybe haven't asked themselves? And if I can give them that different perspective, they're usually going to find the answer, right? We talk about entrepreneurs and real estate investors and all these types of people. they generally have the answers. They maybe just haven't asked the right questions before. So if we can allow them to get that perspective, generally I find that they find the answers themselves and they can pretty quickly figure out what I'm trying to do. Usually it only takes one or two whys to get to the level that we need to get to.
I can see how it would be helpful just having a set meeting time with somebody, whether it's once a week or every few days or even once a month, and just having someone to bounce these things off of who's also in the entrepreneurial space and can kind of understand, the inner workings of their motivations, just to have that objective third person opinion of like, is what you're doing working for where you want to be going? And, to have someone there to question them, because you get caught up in your own bubble and you get caught up in your own thought patterns and stuff. And sometimes you just need to talk to somebody else to break out of that bubble. And I find this even with, less deep things in my life. Like if I'm writing an email to send out to the Rockstar membership here, sometimes I just need a third person opinion to look at and be like, well, what about this? And it's like, it was kind of in the back of my mind thinking about that, but I chose to not put in the email, but they're like, well, why wouldn't you put it? I'm like, yeah, you're right. And then I put it in and I just needed to like break out of that bubble of me being so caught up in that email to look at it from that outside view to realize that it's missing something.
Totally.
So I can see how that would be really beneficial with drilling deep too.
Yeah. And one of my favorite sayings that I've been saying for a very long time, I can't remember where I first heard it, but you can't read the label from inside the bottle.
Oh, that's so good.
It's this value of whether it's a coach or, like you said, maybe someone who's a trusted mentor, maybe even just your spouse, right? Is that has your best interest and knows enough to be able to give you feedback, is like, when you're bringing on a coach or a mentor or whatever, you're bringing in someone who has your best interest at heart. Like, I want to see my clients win, but I'm also not emotionally tied to the business like they are, right? Or like any of their employees might be. I have other than the fact that I find a lot of them like we're friends, but I have a very objective view of their business, and I can ask those types of questions that maybe they haven't even thought to ask. That's where the real value is. And then I can tell when they're, once we get to know each other well enough, if they're coming into from a place of overwhelm or stress or, overthinking, I can take that into account and I can kind of like ease the tension, ease the pressure off, and allow them to get to the real answers. Because, right, we spin ourselves up, and this is one of the mindset pieces, right? We kind of spin ourselves up or we circle around the drain because we are caught in the same cycle of thinking until someone can help break us out of that cycle.
So what's your own story, man? How did you get into all this stuff?
Oh man, my story is I'll try and keep it somewhat brief. I got into the mindset world because of my own struggles with mindset. I'm always reminded of so Tim Ferriss, it's one of the books back here or maybe over here, has Tools of the Titans, and I'm reminded when he said, he was kind of breaking down all the podcasts with these super successful people, and he said most, if not all of them, had a very clear weakness that they turned into a superpower or that they turned into a positive in their lives. You think of someone, for example, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who everyone said, you sound like a robot. You're too big. You're never going to make it in Hollywood. So he said, well, I didn't apply for those jobs. And in fact, the people behind Terminator said they never could have made Terminator if it wasn't for him, because he's the only person who sounded like a robot. Right. Yeah. So taking your weaknesses and making them into a strength is something I did. I played hockey. I'm a Canadian kid, and I went pretty far. I made it to major junior hockey. For those of you who know what that means, if you don't, it's basically just a level below professional hockey. It's your opportunity to get drafted, to get seen by scouts. And in my draft year, which is the most important year, I like to say I orchestrated a complete meltdown over the course of the season. I just could not grasp the concept and deal with failure. So as failure was coming at me, which is inevitable, right? When you're playing at the highest level and you're trying to get better, I just couldn't deal with it. And I basically spiraled out of control into more losses, disagreements with teammates, disagreements with coaches, alcohol, like so many things that just kind of spiraled me out of control. But I think that that story, when I share that, a lot of people go like, there's like a level of trust there when I share that, because they go, oh, like you've done the thing that I'm the most scared of, which is like waste your potential. Right. And I did it on this this huge stage where I could have made millions of dollars, and I kind of blew it. Right. So that was the start of this whole mindset journey. But then, I was an idiot teenager, so I didn't actually recognize that that was an inflection point in my life. As we continued on through life, I kind of had the same pattern in my business. I was trying to grow a personal training business into like online and make it bigger. And there was this moment where I recognized I was falling into the same pattern where I was avoiding failure. I was avoiding the uncomfortable stuff. I was blaming everybody else. And I was like, I got to stop doing this. Right. And so when I recognized that, I really leaned into the mindset pieces and had a great mentor named Xander Fryer who turned me on to a lot of those things. He's another Craig Ballantyne disciple, and helped me recognize that I needed to take responsibility and that I needed to change the stories in my head, because I had all these stories in my head that were installed in me unconsciously when I was younger. And I was letting those stories drive the bus. And that was what was leading to me kind of shying away from failure, being afraid of growth and being afraid of getting to a certain level. And as I leaned into those stories, I had all these recognitions and I saw all this great success in business. And now that I'm coaching these like high performing entrepreneurs, I'm noticing, even though they're quote unquote successful, they're making multiple six figures, seven figures, sometimes even more in business, they still have these limiting beliefs and these stories that aren't serving them. So it's what I have really leaned into. And it basically came from my own experience. Not much more than that, just my own experience, then diving into learning more about it, really putting it into practice myself. And then here we are. And now people are asking me for help, and I get to talk on podcasts like this and all that awesome stuff.
Yeah. What were the stories that you felt you had been installed in you that were holding you back then?
Oh man. I think the biggest one, that if we could encompass them, is this middle class mindset. So grew up in Winnipeg, Canada, which is like a small city in Canada. And my mom was a teacher. My dad was a cop, right? So not blue collar, but certainly like the heart of the middle class, right? And they grew up with parents who, like, there wasn't always money, right? Like it was that level. And generally we're only one or two generations away from that, most of us, right? Where there really wasn't any money. So those beliefs get passed down. So the beliefs that were installed in me, and these weren't always said to me, but they were like installed through kind of osmosis, through movies, through culture, through society, right? Was money doesn't grow on trees. You got to work really, really hard for your money. Usually you're not going to like what you do for money. Get a good job with a good pension so you can retire comfortably, right? These money beliefs, but then also, around wealthy people, that we're not like wealthy people. Wealthy people are bad in some way. That was a big one for me, right? I wanted to be rich, but with the old belief system I had, I would have had to hate myself to be rich. Right. It's crazy. Right. So, so many of those things. And then when it came to hockey, the failure belief was, I had this fixed mindset, right? That failure meant I wasn't good enough. Whereas a more growth mindset would have been failure is feedback, but I couldn't see that at the time. So that was really what hurt me with hockey, was that it was a reflection of my character and who I was. And my identity was so tied to my performance in hockey that it really caused me I put so much pressure on myself, and obviously that spiraled into not good things. So those were some of the things. And I'll tell everyone listening, if you don't know what these are, it's totally okay, because they're subconscious. They're beneath the surface. They're kind of like behind a wall almost, and you have to do some work to pull these out.
Mm-hmm. How do you pull them out?
Great question. So the simplest way to pull them out, first of all, is to kind of put it out there that you want to work on these things, right? There's way back in the day there, they came out with the kind of 4 stages of competence. People have probably heard this, but there's like stage 1 is unconscious incompetence, right? You don't know what you don't know. You're just like blissfully unaware of all the stuff you don't know, right? And this is how most of us were when we were young, right? Then we get into this stage of conscious incompetence. We now realize we don't know much, right? We start to recognize these things. It's like this self-awareness, like, oh no,
Yeah.
right? And then the last 2 stages are conscious competence, as we're starting to build competence, but we have to be very consciously aware of it. And then ideally after lots of time and lots of reps, we get to unconscious competence, where we just are different. We just become better. It's kind of like the 10,000 hour rule, right? So most people with most of their subconscious or unconscious beliefs are unconsciously incompetent. So it can be really hard to pull these to the surface. What I'll encourage you to do is look, our brains are built to solve problems. That's literally what they were built to do, to wire things together and solve problems. Problem is, most people don't give them their brains very good problems to solve. So the first thing that I would say is to start asking yourself better questions and getting more curious, right? So the goal that I want, let's say I want to make $1 million in a year. Why don't I have that yet? And then you start to kind of like go, well, you kind of start to create your answers, and then you start to write those things down, and maybe you start to see some patterns. A great question I was asked is like, what's something you want to do before you die? And why haven't you done it yet? And, you start writing things down, like giving yourselves the space to ask these questions. But the best way, the simplest way to recognize where your unconscious beliefs are and what they are is, what are your yeah buts, right? So, yeah, I could be a millionaire, but, right? Like, what are your things where your story is holding you back, right? So, I could be a millionaire, or I want to be a millionaire, but I'm not good enough yet. That's a belief, right? I want to be a model, but I'm not good looking enough, right? Or I want to be a business owner, but I'm not smart enough, right? What are your yeah buts? Those are probably the places where you have beliefs that are not serving you, right? If you look at my failure story in hockey, right? Is like, yeah, I could go practice and learn more and really lean into like getting better and working on video, but I'm afraid that when I fail, I'm going to look stupid. Or when I fail, people are going to think that I'm no good. Okay, well, there's some beliefs right there. Right? Does that make sense? The yeah buts?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's inherently, I think, a really uncomfortable process, because even the
Very.
questions that you were using as examples there, I'm like, oh yeah, some of those would be pretty uncomfortable for me to face.
Totally. And this was the big thing, right? Kind of a meta thing about, like, for me, was I had to be willing, like I wasn't willing for a long time to get uncomfortable and to feel the messy, not so happy emotions, right? Another belief that I was brought up with, right, is this kind of like American dream, retire at 55 generation, was make your life as easy as possible. And a friend of mine once said, what was it? If you make the easy decisions, you'll have a hard life. If you make the hard decisions, you'll have an easy life. And, I wasn't willing to ask or answer these questions for a long time. And I will encourage, like, I will let people know, like, if you want to do this, be ready for it to not feel great at times, right? Be ready to like have to lean into and accept some not great emotions. And you're going to kind of be, everyone who says, I love to grow, I love education and growing, like, growth sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Growth is hard. You feel like a fraud. You feel all these terrible emotions. You have to work through some pretty dark stories and some shadows and some things that you buried deep down for very good reason, right? But that the juice is worth the squeeze, because coming out on the other side, you're going to have new awareness. You're going to be in a better place, and you're going to be able to actually work with this new skill set that you have, or with this new belief that you have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be agonizing looking at some of those stories.
And that's where I turned away from it, right? Like as soon as things started to get uncomfortable and hard, and there was a possibility that I would fail or that I would feel not so good, I turned away. And it was, I can still remember the first time when I decided to kind of like, I like to say, put my shoulder down and lean into the hard stuff. Right. I can still remember that because it was like this huge aha moment of like every single time in hockey, in business, in school, every single time that there was a potential for failure or a potential to feel not so good, I turned the other way. Right. And it left me at a place where the only option was to move forward and to break through the wall, so to speak.
Do you feel now that you've done a lot of this work that you just keep discovering deeper and deeper levels or more and more stories you weren't even were aware were there? Like, has it ever ended or subsided a bit? Or are you just like,
Unfortunately,
it's
yeah.
just the work never ends?
Yeah, what I say to people is once you start down this path, it's like flipping on a light switch in a messy room that you can't turn off. Right. It's great because now you're not waiting around in the dark hoping that you don't run into something. The light is on, you can see the mess and you can start cleaning it up, but you can't turn the light off. And I lived for a long time, again, thinking that when I got to a certain point, I would be done. And there's a great documentary. The ethics of it are a little interesting, but Jonah Hill interviews his therapist on Netflix called Stutz. The therapist's name is Phil Stutz. So the documentary is called Stutz, Stutz. And if you put aside the ethics of it, it's a really interesting thing because Phil Stutz has these kind of like three rules. And one of the rules is that you're always going to be expected to work hard. Like there's going to be in uncertainty. You're always going to be expected to work hard. And I had this belief that when I got to a certain level of money or when I got to a certain level of working on my beliefs, that I could just put my feet up on my desk and crack a beer and I would be done. Right. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And actually, it's something that if we can shift our beliefs around it, we can realize like that's fundamental to being alive. Right. That's fundamental to growing as a human and becoming a better human is looking for the places where you can be better, looking for the places where you can learn about yourself and become more aware and tackling those. Right. And we always say in business, new levels, new devils, right? Everyone has money problems. Would you rather have the money problems of the homeless guy on the street corner or Elon Musk?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
still problems. Elon's still got to deal with a whole bunch of junk, right? But I'd way rather have his money problems than the homeless person who literally can't find their next meal. So if you can accept the fact that it's always going to be difficult and there's always going to be problems and challenges, then it kind of takes the pressure off and you go, okay, well, then I'd rather solve these problems than these ones.
Mm-hmm. It is overwhelming too, just to think about the never ending tide of problems. But I think
Yes,
you just got to
it can.
I can't speak, compartmentalize. You know what I'm saying?
Compartmentalize. That's a word.
Compartmentalize each problem at a time. And you can't tackle the whole
No.
world at once. You got to just, handle one issue at a time.
Yeah. And again, like I like to say, like, if your eyes are open to it, right? Like if you're openly ready and willing to do the work, those problems will crop up and, you'll be like, ah, there it is again. There's that thing, right? And it's just like, open up your journal, get your pen out and start writing because now's the time to kind of like lean into solving that problem. And this is the other thing, with a lot of high performers is we think that we have to be perfect all the time. Right. So there's this other like recognition that I'll encourage people, right? You mentioned the overwhelm and that's very real and very normal. But, if we can recognize that, and this kind of like ties into faith in something greater than us, whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever you believe in, is that like You're never going to be presented with a problem that you can't solve. You know, what is the saying? Like, God's never going to put you in a position that he doesn't think you can deal with. And also, like, everything is happening exactly as it should in exactly the right timing. So if you can wrap your head around that, like kind of the bigger picture thinking that there's something bigger at play here, then it starts to become less of like, oh, I have to do this and I have to be perfect and I have to fix this, and more of like, it's kind of like a video game where you've just got to fight the next boss and you've got to beat the next level of this video game that we call life. And I don't say that to trivialize life. I say that as more of like, there's always going to be these levels and these challenges. If we can face them more like a game and like, hey, I'm just learning lessons and figuring out the right and wrong way, then we can start to maybe have a little more fun and a little more lightness in our lives, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it, because you're just leveling up, like you're
That's
achieving
it.
new levels.
Yeah.
What are common stories or archetypes that you come across with a lot of your clients? Are there common narratives that you just see with these high performers?
Yeah. So I think the number one narrative is with high performers is control, right? So, and I was in the same boat, and so I'll say to people like, a lot of times we have gotten to the level that we're at by grabbing it by the scruff of the neck and pulling it along, right? It's like, I'm just going to do the thing. I'm just going to pull it along, right? And I'm just going to take control. But a lot of the people that I work with are at a level where if they continue doing that, there's just too much for them to do, right? They have these relatively big businesses, multiple six figures. They've got teams and all these things. Plus they have families that maybe want to see them every once in a while. And them trying to control every little piece and do every little thing is going to put them in an early grave. And it's also bottlenecking their business. Like, it's bottlenecking their business growth because everything relies on them and has to go through them. I actually just finished about an hour ago a call with a client, a newer client. She's over in the UK. Her business does, I think, about 1.5 million pounds a year. So it's a pretty big business. And she's like, I've got like, through the call, we recognize like she's got to let go of some of these things, right? She's going into these businesses. She's the lead design. They do design for like honestly, like Premier League football, we call it soccer teams, like their storefronts, they design them. And she's like the owner of the business, and she's writing down where there's like paint chips and stuff and things that they have to fix. And it's like, that's not your job. Your job is like the big picture design stuff, right? And you trying to control every part of this is hurting you and hurting the business. And probably the person across from you that's paying you is like, why the heck is she worrying about that? Right. So trying to be in control of everything really hurts us. And there actively needs to be that transition from I control everything to I can automate things, I can delegate things, I can create systems for things. That's where a lot of people kind of run into these hiccups because A, it's hard to like create systems and pull yourself out, but B, they are control freaks and they don't want to let go of control because, quote unquote, no one can do it as well as me. Well, that might be the case now, but you're not giving them a chance to do it as well as you. Right. Yeah. So that's one of the things that the control. The other thing I see a lot of is just honestly, like your standard imposter syndrome. Like, I don't deserve this. I'm not worthy of this. I'm a fraud. I shouldn't be making this much money because I'm still that 18-year-old idiot who drinks too much. Right. And really, I just did a presentation on this a couple months ago to our mastermind group. And it was like, we know too much about ourselves. Right. We know all the dumb stuff we've done. Right. And we don't recognize that like other people don't know that stuff about us. Right. Yeah. So we feel like an imposter because of that. But, in reality, we've taken the action steps and done the right things to get to this point. And if other people see us as the expert or other people see us at this level, then our confidence needs to match our competence. Right. And so again, lowering the action threshold so that we can take action, even in the face of fear, even in the face of feeling like an imposter. And then so that we can get that feedback and that evidence that we are on the right path, that we are good enough, that we are we are quote unquote deserving of the level of success we've had. Those are two of the biggest things, is that control and then that feeling like a fraud.
What do you mean by lowering the action threshold?
So everyone's seen the graph on Instagram or whatever, where it's like, we think the road to success is a straight line, but really it's the squiggly line.
Yeah.
I like to look at that as like, beyond just the straight line, we often, some part of our brains thinks that success is one action and it's the perfect action that gets us from here to the final goal immediately, right? It's not just a straight line. It's like, we think that it's like one action step. And so we put so much pressure on doing the right thing now that we forget that this squiggly line is actually a whole bunch of different actions where we made mistakes and we reiterated, right? So we've got this like straight path. We went off the path. Oh, I'm in the trees. Let's get back towards the path. Oh, I'm in the trees on the other side. Let's get back. And we kind of just basically tinker and make changes and reiterate until we can somehow manage our way. It's always messy. It never goes the way you think it will, right? But if you're moving in the right direction, then you're going to give yourself the best chance at success. And Alex Hormozi has a great quote on this that really encapsulates what I'm talking about. He says, if we measure success by taking the action steps that would make it unreasonable to fail, so the only thing we're worried about is taking the action steps, not succeeding, not the outcome goal, not the amount of money or the weight loss or whatever it is, just focus on the next action step. If you keep doing that, you'll succeed by default because you're just doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So lowering the action threshold is, how can I make sure that I still take the next quote unquote right action or the next indicated step on the path, even if I'm scared, even if I feel like I'm going to screw it up royally? Because if you screw it up, you're probably going to learn more anyway. And as long as you're not hurting anybody, like actually harming anybody or moving away from the thing that you want, you're going to learn enough so that you can reiterate and get yourself back towards the path.
Mm. How much do you think is appropriate to beat yourself up? How much beating yourself up is appropriate? Because sometimes I think a little bit doesn't hurt, right?
Totally.
It's a self-corrective mechanism. And it's, not giving yourself any excuses and facing the reality of maybe the mistake you made or the thing you said that you shouldn't have, or whatever it is. But then I think it can probably be taken too far. So what are your feelings about that?
I'd like to answer that question and say 0 is the right amount of beating yourself up. And I'll tell you why I would originally say that kind of snap decision is because I see so many people who are so hard on themselves, like you said, that it doesn't actually serve them.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there is value in it, right? And I would change beating yourself up to, there's value in holding yourself to a higher standard, right? And then when you don't meet that standard, becoming an objective observer of that. Right. If we kind of cycle back to what we talked about early with, like, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. The reason you can't read the label from inside the bottle is because you're so emotionally connected to your business and to what you're doing. If we can hold ourselves to a high standard, right, which is we have high expectations of ourselves. And then when we don't meet those, or when we make a mistake or whatever, we can zoom out and look at it objectively. That's the best way to, I guess the term would be like, to be hard on yourself, is to go, okay, where did I screw that up? What did I mess up? And how could I change it next time? And this is kind of like, I'll say this a different way, is that judgment would be what I consider beating yourself up, is judging yourself. And judgment and curiosity, I like to say, they live next door to each other. So judgment is, I suck, I'm the worst, right? You're literally beating yourself up.
Mhm.
And it usually ends with a period or an exclamation point, that statement, right? Whereas curiosity is a very similar statement, but it ends in a question mark. Do I suck? Am I the worst? Am I terrible at this thing? Or is it just the fact that I made a mistake? Or is it just the fact that I didn't have enough information or I acted too quick or whatever? When we can get curious, it allows us, again, it allows our brain to solve problems instead of us just saying, I suck. So that's where like language is really important. I think that we should hold ourselves to a high standard that forces us to do hard things and grow. But when we make mistakes, instead of judging ourselves and like beating ourselves up, let's call it gracefully correcting ourselves.
Mm. How are you personally working on your own mindset, Gavin?
So logistically, some of the things that I do on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis is
Yeah.
every morning. So I'll kind of take you through the mindfulness practices that I have. So every morning, I start my shower on cold. So it's something that, and a lot of people, there's a lot of talk about, you don't need cold tubs and all this stuff. The reason why I do it is because it reminds me that I can do hard things and that I'll be okay. I won't die. Right. So it's kind of like my hard thing to start the day. And then as my coffee's brewing or whatever my in the morning, I'll just do a little bit of journaling. It's not much, it's maybe 5 minutes. And I have some non-negotiables in my journaling. What I like about journaling for anybody who's tried it and maybe doesn't like it is it's like having a conversation with yourself. I find a lot of my ideas land and a lot of, light bulb moments happen when I'm talking or when I'm writing. So I'll just write about my day and things like that. And then I do two things that are non-negotiables. One of them is what I call a brag book. So again, if we're hard on ourselves, too hard on ourselves, I say to people, write down one win that you had yesterday or one place where you can brag, right? We were taught to be humble as kids. Well, this is your opportunity to brag a little bit. Yeah, I closed that client or, I worked out or anything really. I moved this deal forward, something like that. So I do a brag book. I do one brag and then I do what I call like a vibe check, which is essentially an emotional check-in, which is like, what am I feeling right now? And what is that trying to teach me? So for me, I hid a lot of my emotions like most men in the 90s did. And I kind of like lost my way in that I didn't know what I was feeling. So I'm really working on becoming better at regulating my emotions and being aware of what I'm feeling in the moment. So if I'm having an argument with my spouse or if something happens in my business or something goes wrong, I don't snap off the handle. I can respond to it in an emotionally regulated way. So those are some of the things that I do in the morning. And then one thing that I do is I'm on a lot of calls. I coach a lot of people. I kind of take a lot of other people's stuff. So I set aside time every day for me to what I call take care of my nervous system, which is could be as simple as closing my eyes and focusing on my breath for 2 minutes. It could be a meditation. It could be breath work. It could be journaling, something where I don't have any inputs. I'm just like going inward and letting myself just like calm my nervous system down. Those are some of the non-negotiables for me. Also, I like to, make sure that I get outside and go for a walk every day, even if it's a 5 or 10 minute walk, just to get outside and again, get out of my head. Those are some of the things that I do to work on my mindset. I know it seems simple, but those are the foundational pieces.
Yeah, they're like little mental aid stations. I can
Absolutely.
I can see how you could feel bogged down mentally and emotionally by
Yeah.
just hearing about so many other people's problems through the day. And
Yeah.
especially if you're like an empathetic, helpful person, which you definitely seem to be, then I feel like you would take those problems on.
Yeah, and that was actually one thing my wife said to me. I've had my fair share of mental health struggles and challenges, and my wife just said to me like, you act like a therapist for so many people. I'm not saying I am a therapist in any way. If anyone's listening to this who, legally speaking, I am not. But a lot of times people will bring problems beyond their business, right? Big, tough problems, sickness, illness in the family, deaths, divorce, difficulties in marriage, difficulties in business, money issues, right? I often I just take that all in and then I sit with it, right? So I've actually 2 weeks ago, I had my first ever session with a therapist as well, which was so great because I just got, again, more little things that I can do to take care of my own mental state so that I can show up the best for other people.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples offhand of roadblocks that some of your clients have faced? Mental roadblocks that you helped identify and then them overcome, and how they were able to do so?
Yeah, I want, as you're talking, one jumps to mind that I'm sure a lot of people maybe have experienced or are experiencing and aren't sure that, like, don't know what's going on, and that's it can simply be characterized as fear of success. Right. So we get to a certain level of success, call it. Okay. So let's say we get to a certain level of income. Let's say we've always wanted to make $1 million and we get to like 900K and we know that we're knocking on the door. And then somehow we manage to self-sabotage. We kind of stop doing the things that worked before. The calls stop coming, the money stops coming, the deals flow stops happening, and we don't know what's going on. And so that's a place where we can kind of pull the thread and go a little deeper with people, because it's very common to be afraid of success, because when you hit a certain level of success, whatever that means to you, that could mean 6 figures, that could mean 7 figures, that could mean a certain amount of real estate property, like properties that you've invested in. It could be a certain size of team or whatever it is. People in your life are going to view you differently. It's just a fact, right? It's the exact reason why a lot of people struggle to lose weight, because when you lose weight and you become you fit into a different identity, there are different expectations of you in the world, right? So if I'm known as a millionaire, which, so many people want, I want $1 million, I want to be a millionaire. There's a different set of expectations on a millionaire than there is on anybody else. It can be scary, and there can be, like, you can lose relationships with parents, with friends, with people that you grew up with, whatever. There's, again, more expectations. There's so many little things that we didn't account for when we said we wanted this goal, or when we said we wanted to build this business to a certain level. So I think 90% of my job is just asking questions. So if someone is noticing that they're struggling with something, I'll ask them questions to try and allow them to understand what's going on, because they understand better what's happening than I do. I just have to kind of pull it out of them. So I think that's one of the biggest things that, if you find that you're noticing friction or resistance at a certain level, or you kind of like keep getting to that level and it's like you're hitting a ceiling and then falling back down, whatever it is, success in any way, I encourage you to dig deeper on and ask more questions, get more curious, because there's probably something there that, as crazy as it sounds, where you're afraid of success.
It's a really interesting one, right? Like, why would somebody be afraid of success if that's the thing they're chasing?
Totally.
But you're right.
And it's because there's these other things that go along with success.
Yeah. And you don't account for that. Like, you don't think about how other people are going to perceive you, or what they're going to.
Or like, again, if we grew up, I know I grew up disliking wealthy people, right? And we want to be wealthy. Well, what do we think is going to happen when we become wealthy? More people are going to dislike us. More people are going to, come after us for money. More people are going to try and extort us and whatever it is. It's like, those are very real things that are happening in our subconscious brain that we need to address so that we can move past it.
That's interesting stuff, man. It's fascinating how your psychology really will dictate, what you choose to pursue in life and your motivations. And that's a great example of the fear of, okay, now I've got some money. People are going to start not liking me, or friends are going to get jealous of me, or family members. now they're, shooting little comments at me and stuff. Do I really want
Right.
this if it means that people I care about in my life are going to stop liking me?
Totally. And like, some of the common ones for me recently even have been like, I like to wake up early because that's when I can get a lot of really good work done, which
Mhm.
means I leave the party at 9.
Yeah.
Right.
Me
So
too,
people
man. Me
are
too.
right. So people
Yeah.
question you. Or,
Yes.
over the past year and a half, even 2 years since I started working with Craig, I all but quit drinking. I'll have one drink, man, every 3 months or something. And there, a lot of people, I don't really see them anymore because they were drinking buddies. But, there's fear that, you go out with a group of friends and you say, oh, I'll have a water, I'll have a Diet Coke. And they go, what the heck are you doing? Why aren't you having a beer? Right now, you got to explain yourself. And it's this whole thing. So it's like, it's easier to just have a drink. It's like, well, yeah, but now you're kind of like going against yourself so that you can make them feel more comfortable. So there's all these little things, right? That it changes when you are pursuing something that most people aren't willing to pursue or don't have the courage to pursue.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable, but it also makes you question if you want to pursue it, if you really want to be, the tall
Yeah.
poppy, and, why do you care to do that in the first place? Like, why do you
So
want to be the
good.
guy that refuses to have a drink? Like, why can't you just live like a regular life? Like, you start questioning yourself and you're
Yeah.
like,
And
apparently I
then
know I'm wasting potential, but at the same time, why am I so ambitious in the first place? Is this some deep insecurity I have that I need to be this guy that's going to achieve these
yeah.
things? I don't know how to handle it personally.
And I'll also encourage anyone asking those questions, including you, Anthony, is like define a normal life, right? Like
Yeah.
define like
Yeah.
just because we grew up in a society where it was normal to consume alcohol when you go out socially doesn't mean that that's normal. Right.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the highly successful people in like the business personal development space, most of them don't drink. Right. And it's like, huh, that's interesting. Or they'll say, I still remember one of the most successful people in the personal training industry. I went to my first personal training, like business summit, this event, and everyone was going out drinking. And I was so excited about it. And he just said, like someone said, hey, you coming? And he just went, I'm not a big drinker. And he just didn't go. Right. And it's like, oh, like I didn't twig. I just thought he was weird at the time. Now, 5, 6, 7 years later, I'm like, ah, I get it now. You can just make the choice that you don't want to drink. And he still was able to get up at 4 a.m. and, or whatever time he gets up and do his work and get stuff done and then present at the thing. And I'm dragging my ass out of bed at 9:30 because I'm exhausted and I'm hungover.
Yeah. And then it takes 3 days to recover. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's like, if you look at 1 week, and half the week is just spent recovering for like, that's 50% of your week. You underperformed.
And like for me, it's just like the deeper level of that is I had an interesting relationship with it through sports and through hockey. It's just not the type of person that I want to be. And I feel far better not drinking. And I've found that I can have just as much fun without alcohol, which is even better. I'm like, oh, I don't need to rely on the booze to like lubricate me. I can have fun myself. So that's
Yeah.
been a big realization, for that example.
Yeah. But it's so painful cutting that piece of your life off, right? Those relationships, those friendships, which
Yeah.
might have just were, drinking buddies and centered around alcohol, but it's a part of your identity at the
Yeah.
time that you're cutting off to grow into a new identity. It's like
Yeah,
cutting a limb or a finger off to grow a new one. Like it's painful.
totally. But I've found too that, the people that a lot of people were just like, oh, okay. And those are the ones that really matter. And the people that kind of distance themselves, it's like, again, oh, okay. Clearly like this wasn't that much deeper. Whereas the people who are like, okay, that doesn't change anything. I still want to talk to you. I still want to hang out with you, and you can drink whatever the heck you want. I don't care. And maybe they have a beer, maybe they don't. That's totally fine.
Yeah. So do you think that drinking one specifically just comes from people feeling uncomfortable, like you're judging them for drinking?
So I heard this, I think it was on Instagram, that alcohol, let's be real, alcohol is a drug. Alcohol is the only drug where people will question you for not partaking, right? No one will sit at a table at a restaurant and go, "Why aren't you shooting heroin into your veins right now?"
Yeah.
But they'll say, "Why aren't you drinking?" With women, are you pregnant? With guys,
Yeah.
are you an
Yeah.
alcoholic? Right? No one does that. No one says, "Why aren't you smoking crack right now?" You know?
Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't say that alcohol is definitely not as bad as those things, but it's not good for you. It's poisonous. Like, it is toxic to our body. So it's like, why should you care what I'm putting in my body or not? I'll drink whatever the heck I want, just like I'll eat whatever I want. And you don't really have to have a say in it, you know?
Yeah. But immediately right there, it causes now a conflict between you and that person, right? Because you're like, look,
Totally.
back off. I don't want to drink. Like, why are you trying to force me to drink? And now it's a
Totally.
conflict. So it's just easier to avoid that conflict for
100%.
all of us.
And if you're willing to have that conversation, it also, what I've found is it allows me to be understood a little bit better. So, I can say, and I feel I can then set the example, because what I find is, like, most of the people that I know would probably rather not drink, but they feel like they feel like they have to. So me saying, you know what, no, I'll have a non-alcoholic beer, or I'll have a Diet Coke or whatever, is they're like seeing this example of what they could possibly choose to do if they just chose to get uncomfortable. And so I'm kind of like being an example for them.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that people are thinking, but oftentimes won't say.
Right. And that, in my opinion, is the definition of being a leader,
Got it.
is
Yeah.
just doing the things that align with who you want to be. Now, if you want to drink, I don't care. Go for it. But the person that I want to be, the best version of me, there's not a beer in his hand. So I made that decision, and that allows me to hold an example for somebody else that I control. I'm in control of alcohol. It's not in control of me. And that's a decision that I make. And you can choose to do that too by my example, or you can choose not to. And both of those are okay.
Yeah. Cool, man. I want to respect your time. I know you got to get out of here.
Thanks,
You've got a
man.
great Instagram. So do you want to shout that out, and anything else that you want to share
Yeah.
with people?
I'd love to share two things. So my Instagram is at Gavin McHale 1. I would love it if you checked it out, folks. I also agree. I think we're doing a good job of putting good stuff out there. One other thing I want to point people to is a free video on YouTube. You don't have to put in any information or anything. It's a daily money attraction visualization. So you actually don't even need to like meditate or close your eyes or anything. You can do it while you're walking or driving or something like that. It's less than 10 minutes, and it just reframes your mindset around abundance and money. And I think it's super, super valuable. People have gotten ridiculous results from like listening to it for a week. Like, some of the stuff we've seen is just crazy. And it's a 9.5 minute video about reframing your beliefs around money. And it's a cool little visualization. I encourage people to check it out. So I'll send you the link, but it's dailymoneyattraction.com will redirect you to YouTube, and you can check out that video.
Okay. So do you have to sit down and just listen to the video, or can you just have it on in the background? Or?
No, like Craig Ballantyne will listen to it all day while he's working. He'll just have it on a loop all day.
Oh,
So you can just have it on in the background. It's probably better if you like close your eyes and visualize, but you can just have it on.
Yeah. Cool. And just hammer it into your brain.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Cool, man. Gavin, it was a pleasure getting to chat with you. Some interesting topics. And I think it'd be good to have you back and dive into more of this stuff, man.
I'd love to, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Appreciate it, man. And we'll let you go. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.